My name is Serena. I am 28, and if you have ever sat at a family table knowing you were the afterthought, you already know how silence can bruise deeper than words. The turkey was carved, the laughter warm, but my mother's eyes told the truth she never said. I smiled, holding my calm and my secret worth $15 million. The table gleamed under the chandelier, every crystal catching light like it had something to prove. Silver knives lined up perfectly beside china plates, waiting for their turn in the quiet war of tradition. My mother sat at the head of the table, her voice sweet as she praised Liam for closing a deal at his firm, calling him the kind of son any parent would be proud to raise. Her words rolled out like honey over glass, smooth but sharp. I sat across from her, smiling because that was what was expected. The laughter around the table rose in warm waves that never reached me. My father carved the turkey without looking up, his silence another kind of loyalty. He had spent a lifetime pretending that ignoring things made them less real. Liam leaned back in his chair, basking in the glow of their approval. He had that ease people get when they know the world is already on their side. He passed the gravy my way with a grin that said I should be grateful to be at the same table. My mother's tone softened again, almost pitying, as she reminded me that some people are better at small things while others are made for responsibility. The words landed like dust, soft but suffocating. Around us the silverware chimed, each clink a reminder of order, of roles carefully rehearsed over years. My aunt nodded, my cousins laughed politely, and I watched it all like a stage I'd already performed on too many times. The chandelier's light trembled slightly, as if even it was tired of the performance. My father poured himself another drink. No one spoke to fill the silence that followed, but the quiet said more than any toast. I stared at the carved turkey, at the knife glinting under the light, and wondered how something could look so perfect while being pulled apart. The hierarchy in that room didn't need words. It lived in posture, in who was heard and who was forgotten. I took a slow breath, the kind that hides 1,000 thoughts behind it. Let them laugh. Let them believe silence meant defeat. I had learned long ago that silence was not surrender. It was a strategy. It was the sound before the change. While my family measured success in surface approval, I was building something far quieter. I started as a financial strategist for a small fintech startup that most people thought would fail. I stayed when others left, taking 12% equity instead of a salary increase. It was a risk that looked foolish at the time, the kind that doesn't make sense to people chasing quick wins. I spent years working late, studying trends, and learning how to build value from systems no one else noticed. We built algorithms that helped small banks predict consumer credit behavior, a tool that quietly changed the way community finance worked. Then Morgan Stanley came knocking with an acquisition deal worth $125 million. My shares, once dismissed as paper promises, were suddenly worth $15 million. When the confirmation email arrived, I stared at the numbers without emotion. It wasn't luck. It was patience made visible. I never told my family about it. They measured worth by titles and praise, not by persistence or foresight. I wanted to see who they were when they thought I had nothing to offer. The silence became my filter. In the quiet, I could see who respected people and who respected power. Money didn't change me. It revealed how little they had ever known me. I had learned to delay gratification, to think in decades instead of days. Every choice, every late night, every sacrifice had compounded like interest. What they saw as stillness had been building momentum. What they called quiet had been a strategy. So when they looked at me across that table laughing, I didn't feel smaller. I felt steady. I had already won the kind of game they didn't even know they were playing. Looking back, I realized my family had built an economy of control where affection was traded like currency. My mother's voice was always soft but sharp, her compliments to Liam stitched with pride while her words to me carried a quiet correction, a reminder to stay small. When I asked for help with tuition for my MBA, she told me I should learn to live within my means. The same week, my father signed the down payment for Liam's new house. They called it a reward for his potential. I called it proof that merit never stood a chance against favoritism. My father never spoke up. His silence had its own language, one that said comfort mattered more than fairness. He was a good man in theory, but good men often let wrong things stand to avoid the weight of confrontation. Over the years, I learned to stop seeking validation from voices that only echoed each other. Every insult, every dismissal became a quiet motivation. I started to see how emotional debt compounds faster than financial debt, how manipulation thrives in families that mistake obedience for love. So I stopped borrowing their approval. I stopped paying interest on their opinions. While they invested in comfort, I invested in competence. I learned to build stability from logic, to trust data over emotion. My success didn't grow out of rebellion, it grew out of discipline. They believed they had broken me into compliance, but what they really did was teach me the value of independence. Every slight, every no, became part of my education. I understood that freedom isn't something given, it's something you earn quietly until no one can take it away. Liam leaned back in his chair, his grin stretching wider as the laughter around him swelled. He said I was drifting again, that every family needed someone to make the rest feel accomplished. His words floated across the table, sweetened by the same confidence that had always shielded him from consequence. My mother chuckled. My father looked down. And for a moment, the room felt like every Thanksgiving before it. But something inside me had shifted. I met his eyes and smiled, small and deliberate, the kind that doesn't reach the surface, but changes the air around it. The chandelier above us flickered, light trembling against polished silver. His grin faltered as he noticed. He asked what I was smiling at, his voice tight. A thread pulling through the silence. I let it stretch, savoring the weight of his uncertainty. Then I leaned forward slightly, my tone steady. I told him he was about to learn the cost of underestimating me. My phone rested beside my plate, the screen glowing softly under the chandelier's shimmer. I turned it toward him. The email header caught the light, each word clear and undeniable. Final wire transfer confirmed. $15 million. The room stilled. My father's knife paused mid-cut. My mother's breath caught. Liam blinked, his eyes scanning the numbers like they might rearrange themselves into something less humiliating. I didn't say anything more. I didn't have to. The silence carried its own gravity. Power no longer belonged to the loudest person at the table. It sat quietly in front of them, steady and undeniable. I leaned back in my chair, hands folded, calm as the world they had built around their pride began to tilt. The room fractured in an instant. Liam's laughter stopped short, his grin twisting into disbelief. He pushed his chair back so fast it scraped the hardwood, the sound cutting through the air like a blade. He shouted that I was arrogant, that I had betrayed the family, that no one hides $15 million unless they have something to prove. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass, her voice breaking as she told me to stop embarrassing him. The glass tipped, red spilling across the lace tablecloth, seeping into the fabric like a wound that refused to close. My father finally looked up, his jaw tight, his silence splintering under the weight of what he could no longer ignore. The cousins went still, forks mid-air, their eyes flicking between us as if the truth itself had come alive and was stalking the room. Liam's face flushed red, his voice cracking between rage and panic. He said money couldn't buy respect, that I was nothing but a fraud dressed in luck. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't move. I told him that money didn't make me better. It made me free, free from needing his approval, free from asking for a seat at a table built on lies. The silverware rattled as he slammed his fist down, the chandelier quivering above us. My mother cried his name, my father whispered enough, but no one stopped the collapse that had already begun. The fire in the hearth hissed, sparks leaping like it wanted to escape too. I sat there, calm, while Liam's words turned to noise. Around us, everything that once kept its hierarchy intact fell quiet. And in that silence, the truth finally spoke louder than any of them ever had. When the shouting faded, I pushed my chair back and stood. No one tried to stop me. The air was heavy with what had been said and what could never be taken back. My mother's hand hovered above the spilled wine. My father's eyes followed me, but didn't move. For once, I didn't feel small under their silence. I felt done. I walked through the hallway that had held every photograph of Liam's achievements, the same walls where my name was never framed. My heels clicked against the floor, steady, deliberate. I thought about how much energy I had spent trying to earn a place in rooms where truth was never welcome. I used to think freedom meant success, that the right number in a bank account could fix the ache of being unseen. But as I stepped outside into the cool air, I understood that freedom was something quieter. It was the absence of needing permission to exist. I remembered a conversation with a mentor years ago, a woman who had built her own life from the ground up. She told me that worth does not require witnesses, that the people who need to see your value will never see it until you stop asking them to. I didn't understand it then. I do now. I had spent years thinking dignity was something you had to prove. Tonight, I learned it was something you had to protect. The 15 million was proof of what I could do, but it was never the victory. The real victory was walking away without needing anyone to acknowledge it. The years that built me were not glamorous. I worked double shifts, took night classes, and turned down every shortcut that came dressed as opportunity. I kept my promises to myself even when no one noticed. I built habits that no one could take credit for. I said no when saying yes would have made me likable. Discipline became my quiet rebellion. Every early morning, every late night, every decision to stay silent instead of explaining myself had been practice for this moment. Standing outside, I breathed in the night air, clean and cold. The anger that had carried me for so long began to fade, replaced by something steadier. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. There was no applause waiting, no validation coming, just peace. I finally understood that power without permission was the kind that lasts. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could rise without needing to be seen. The house behind me was still full of noise, but none of it belonged to me anymore. My silence had done what words never could. It had set me free. The night was colder than I expected. Snow had started to fall, soft and slow, covering the driveway like forgiveness. The air smelled clean, untouched by the arguments still echoing behind the walls I had just left. I stopped by the window and caught my reflection in the glass. The house glowed faintly inside, the same place that had once made me feel small. For the first time, I didn't look like the girl who used to wait for permission to speak. I looked like someone who no longer needed to be understood to know her worth. The stars hung sharp against the sky, distant but steady. They reminded me of how long light can travel without needing to be seen to exist. I thought about my mother and my brother, about how they had both been prisoners of expectation. Their love had been shaped by fear, their pride by illusion. I didn't hate them anymore. Pity had softened into compassion. I understood now that people who can't see others clearly rarely see themselves either. The snow deepened around my shoes, quieting everything. My breath came out in slow clouds, each one carrying a little more of the weight I had held for years. I wasn't thinking about revenge or justice anymore. I was thinking about peace, about truth, about the way silence can rebuild what noise destroys. I glanced once more at my reflection, the faint shimmer of light behind it, and it felt symbolic. I was never the background noise they mistook me for. I was always the voice waiting for silence. And now, in the cold and quiet, I could finally hear it. If your silence has ever been mistaken for weakness, ask yourself what it was really protecting. Was it peace or the fear of not being heard? Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop explaining and start becoming. You don't need to fight every battle to prove your worth. Some truths reveal themselves when you no longer chase recognition. Tell me, if silence could speak for you, would it ask for justice or for peace? Share your thoughts below. Maybe your story is where someone else finally finds their courage to stay true to who they are.